Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan, and I have some good news and bad news. The good news is that 22% of you are subscribed to the channel. The bad news, 78% of you are not. And why is this bad news? Because if you don't subscribe, the Shrike will get you. I don't make the rules, I just make sure the Shrike enforces them. So today, we're going to be talking about 3 books, 3 new-ish sci-fi releases. 2 of them were released in 2025, and one of them was also released in 2025, kind of. So let's get into that one. We are starting with There Is No Antimemetics Division by Quantum. So this book was originally written between 2015 and 2020 and published online as part of the collaborative fiction project, the SCP Foundation. It was then compiled into a novel and published independently in 2020, however, was later revised and published with a traditional publisher in 2025. Some of those changes include removing all of the direct SCP references, which stands for Special Containment Procedures, and they were referred to in the updated version as unknowns. So this is a new book, kind of, which we can sort of count as a 2025 release. And just quickly, before we get into what this book is all about, I did actually want to show you the physical copy itself, because I have the new hardcover right here, and I quite like the cover art on it, but I did have a bit of an issue with the dust jacket. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to come through on the camera, but you might be able to see that the dust jacket is just kind of, it's very rounded. It's not really conforming to the book. It looks a bit strange, and it's more of an issue when you open the book up, because yeah, it just kind of like springs open. And this is what it looks like after I've spent quite a lot of time and effort trying to get it to conform to the shape of the book. And it's just a strange material, or yeah, I don't know. We're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but we will judge the publisher. And Ballantine Books, not your best work. So what is the premise for There Is No Antimemetics Division? Well, humanity is under attack from something called anti-memes, and these things attack memory, identity, and reality itself, and there is an organization that is created in order to defend humans from these anti-memes. And I totally bought into this premise because it is creepy and surreal, and it is really interesting to see these characters try and deal with something just so abstract. You might be able to record something, but then when you look back at the tape, it's gone. Or you write it down and you look at the paper and it's no longer there. So how are we able to defend ourselves against something that is truly alien and sort of beyond our understanding? However, as I continued, I felt like I struggled to connect to the book as much as I wanted to. For one, I felt like the characters were rather flat, and I wasn't really invested in what little character arcs there were. And in terms of the plot, it's interesting because to me, the chapters felt like short stories. I read a Q&A with the author where he said that between the original version and the revised edition, he had tied the storylines together a little bit more to make it feel more like a novel. I haven't read the original version, but I'm not entirely sure they were successful in doing that, because to me, they were loosely connected, but I didn't feel like there was a big payoff. I actually feel like this might work better as a short story collection. Now, an interesting element that's used in the book is there are sometimes words, sentences, or even full paragraphs that are redacted. They are just black markers. It looks like you're reading a redacted CIA document. And at first I thought this was kind of interesting and clever. And it's kind of fun to try and guess what some of those redactions are. And I think maybe some of them you can pick up through context, and perhaps if you're more familiar with the SCP Foundation. I'm not that familiar at all. This is my introduction to the concept of that collaborative writing project. Maybe you would be able to piece together more of the things that I was able to. However, as it was used more and more throughout the book, it started to feel a tiny bit like a gimmick, and my eyes started glazing over and just sort of skimming through things. So for me, it was unique, but a little bit hit or miss. Now, I'm not sure why exactly, but I was expecting this book to have some hard sci-fi. Maybe it's because the author's pen name is Quantum, but that is not really the case. There is a little bit of science in it, but I would describe this book as weird fiction. It combines sci-fi with some horror, cosmic horror. It's rather fantastical or seemingly fantastical at points, and The author that this book reminded me the most of was Jeff Vandermeer. So if you like that creepy, surreal style of something like Annihilation or Born, then you might like this book as well, because I think it shares some of those similarities. However, I think a strength of Vandermeer's is his prose. I think he is a beautiful writer. He really captures the atmosphere of those weird and creepy and unsettling settings. Whereas the prose in this book was rather dry. I'm going to pick a paragraph or two just to read to you and see if I can kind of convey the feeling that I was experiencing while reading the book. So here are just two quick excerpts from chapter 1, so there's no spoilers here. I'm going to read it to you and let me know what you think. She toys nervously with her lighter. She wastes a little of the flame. She is here to meet Marlowe, and the sea level is scary. Seas never want to see you for a small thing. It's the end of the world or nothing. Something in her bag chimes. It's time for a pill. She fishes her phone out and tells it to remind her later. She hesitates, silence from the other two, but she hasn't been told to stop. Another glance at the gun. She needs a raise. So if I read that and you didn't notice any issues, that's great. I hope you enjoy the writing style of the book. But for me, it kind of felt like the book was written almost in bullet points or just a list of stage directions, because the average sentence length in this book to me seemed like it was about 6 words long. And I just found it hard to get into a flow and enjoy the reading experience of the story when it feels like it was delivered to me in chunks like this. And I just started to find it a little bit bothersome, but maybe it's a me thing, maybe none of you guys noticed that or had the same experience. So overall, I am glad that I read this book because the ideas and concepts are really interesting and intriguing. But beyond that, I felt like every other aspect of the book just kind of felt out of my grasp. Like the characters trying to fight these anti-memes, I couldn't quite make sense of it all. I do think this is a unique book, and I think a lot of people are going to enjoy it, and the people that do enjoy it, I see why, because there is something about it. It just didn't quite hit for me. I gave There Is No Antimemetics Division a 6 out of 10. Alright, up next we have Where the Axe is Buried by Ray Nayler. So this is the second book I've read by Nayler. I read The Mountain in the Sea, which is a book about intelligence and consciousness and robots and octopuses. I thought that book was great, so I was really looking forward to Where the Axe is Buried. So the premise for this one is that in a somewhat near future, there is an authoritarian superpower known as the Federation, and there are also Western European countries that are governed by artificially intelligent prime ministers. So the first thing that I notice about Where the Axe is Buried is that the world building is fantastic. The level of thought that has been put into the technology, the politics, the history, just so many details that make the world feel alive. I have heard this book compared to dystopian classics like 1984 and Brave New World, and I really do think this is a great dystopian book for our generation, sort of dealing with technology and challenges of the future. And something else I enjoyed in the book was the writing style. I felt like the prose in The Mountain in the Sea was decent to good, and in Where the Axe is Buried, it is good to great. So this is his second novel, and he has a novella as well. So I think he's improving as a writer, so that's a good sign. I'm looking forward to seeing his writing to continue to develop as he writes more and more books. And here's just a quick example of one of the quotes that I really enjoyed from the book. "That was what history was like everywhere he traveled. Someone had sanded the splinters down." I thought that was just such a great way of describing how we smooth over things from the past and change how they are remembered. So something else that I liked about the writing in Where the Axe is Buried is he has books within books. So in The Mountain in the Sea, there are excerpts from a couple of different books, one about sort of the science of octopuses, and for a while, I wondered, is this a real book? Is this an actual book that he's referencing? No, it's a book within a book. But it was so interesting, I almost wanted to go and read this other fake book. And that happens again in Where the Axe is Buried. So it kind of adds to sort of the history, the culture, the world that we're enjoying as we follow this story. And it gives it depth. And I think there's just been real thought and love and care that's been put into this story. So to break down the specific style of this book, I would say that The Mountain in the Sea was a mix of science and philosophy, and that this book, while it did have a little bit of science in it, was more focused on politics and philosophy. And I would say, as a sci-fi reader, I'm maybe a little bit more drawn to the style of The Mountain in the Sea, but I do think the types of things that this book explores, I feel like they were explored and executed in a satisfying way. Now, a minor gripe that I had with the book was that it's only around 320 pages long, and there are about 6 main characters. So we bounce around a lot. It did take me a decent portion of the book to remember exactly who was who and what was going on. And I think this is a rare case where a book might have actually benefited from being longer, because when you divide the page length by all of those characters, it doesn't give you that much time to get that much plot progression for each of those characters' stories. I think if you added, another 100, 120 pages, we could have fleshed out those character arcs a bit more and developed some more satisfying character arcs. I think we also could have added a little bit more meat to the bone of the plot, because at times this had the makings of a political thriller, but there just wasn't quite enough plot development or exciting reveals in order for it to really deliver on that front. So overall, I enjoyed this book and I am excited to read more from Ray Nayler. I think there were some elements in this book that were an improvement, but there were others where I felt like they were executed better in The Mountain in the Sea. I ended up giving Where the Axe is Buried an 8 out of 10. And finally, we have Shroud by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So this book was actually nominated for a Hugo Award at the 2026 Hugo. I was about to say Oscars. At the Hugo Awards coming up in August. So now is actually a good time to pick it up and read it and see if you think it deserves to win come award show time. So I have read, this will be my 5th book from Tchaikovsky, and I'll be honest, the first book I read was Children of Time, and I'm still kind of chasing that high. There have been other books that I liked, but none quite on that level. So I was intrigued to see if Shroud could finally be the one. So Shroud is a story about a crewed mission that crash lands on a distant moon named Shroud, and they encounter something that is truly alien. So at first I did struggle to get into the book just a little bit because the story beats felt rather familiar. If you have read a story about a mission crash landing on a distant planet or an alien planet or moon, it kind of felt pretty similar to things that I've read before. I read The Invincible by Stanislav Lem recently, and some of the things felt pretty similar to that. So I was just kind of waiting for it to get to some of the good stuff. And that kind of took a while because to me, the stakes never really felt that high, or at least as high as they should have, and the pacing somewhat dragged. There are quite a lot of technical descriptions, and I do like finding out scientific information in my science fiction, but it started to feel a little bit like filler because those descriptions weren't really leading to interesting scientific concepts or being sort of the driving force behind any exciting story beats. I also didn't really care for the characters. I struggled to connect emotionally to their journey, and I felt like the banter between them was somewhat hit or miss. I think in general, I sort of struggled with the tone of this book because there were some elements that kind of described this as a corporate mission, and there was some kind of interesting commentary there about what a mission like this would be like if rather than sort of this join the force and we're going to go explore this for the good of mankind. It's like, no, this is for profits. And that's an interesting take, but at times it felt like it was played for humor. And that meant I was just kind of enjoying or connecting with those ideas on a surface level. Like I kind of wanted the book to either choose between being this like unsettling first contact story or like a space adventure satire. And it had elements of both, but didn't really fully land in either direction for me. However, the book definitely still was worth reading because of the otherworldly qualities. Something that I enjoy about Tchaikovsky books is he does a great job of writing things that aren't human, whether it's animals, insects, aliens. He has this fantastic ability to sort of see outside the human experience or create or imagine something outside the human experience, which is intriguing and unsettling. And even though it's not human, it is able to reflect human experiences or make you think about yourself or, human society within the universe in comparison to these things that just kind of freaking you out, man. And Tchaikovsky just kind of drip feeds you these elements towards the beginning of the book, but they start to play a larger role in this story in the second half of the book, and I think the book has a great ending. So in the end, I felt rather similar about Shroud as I did with Tchaikovsky's space opera book, Shards of Earth, in that there were some things that were a little bit hit or miss, or some things that were just kind of fine. But then it had this one awesome concept of unspace. And Shroud has this awesome otherworldly quality to it. I think all of the Tchaikovsky books I've read have had interesting elements to them, but the only one that's kind of put them all together, stuck the landing, created not just 5-star moments, but a 5-star read overall, is Children of Time. I like Shroud, but it was a 7 out of 10. So there you go. I thought these 3 sci-fi books were pretty good, but we didn't find a 5-star read. Although we do have one more chance to do so, one more chance to find a 5-star read for the month as we spin the quantum wheel in order to find out the patron pick for the month of June. Welcome to the quantum wheel, where all of the patron picks are both simultaneously picked and not picked until we observe a winner. Let's find out what I'll be reading in the month of June. Can we find something better than Where the Axe is Buried? Because that was a decent bar. I like that book. Let's see. It looks like it might be Timescape, or maybe... Yes! Timescape holds on. Okay, Timescape by Gregory Benford. This is a time travel novel that is supposed to be on the harder end of the sci-fi spectrum. So if either of those 2 descriptors sound interesting to you, check it out and pick up Timescape in the month of June. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, or you just want to avoid the Shrike's wrath, click the subscribe button, and if you really enjoyed it, consider checking out the perks of becoming a Patreon member, where you can become one of my robots, androids, or cyborgs, like Nima and New Eden, Half-Ogre, Zakawe, Samil, Colin, and the new and improved Bamsis. And you can find more sci-fi content over here.